decide on our audit strategy. Do we take a controls-based approach, a substantive approach, or a mixed approach? Now, if these things are new concepts to you, definitely check out my other videos on the audit risk model. But if you understand the audit risk model, today we're going to investigate and discuss a little bit more about why we test internal controls, the process around testing internal controls, and how we evaluate the results and their impact on audit strategy. So let's get into it. What's up, audit fans? Welcome back to all of my regular subscribers from places like, and I have a list here, India, Kenya, Canada, Pakistan, Mauritius, Nepal, Zambia, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Saudi Arabia, Sri Lanka, Egypt, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Uganda. If you're from somewhere else, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. For those people who are new, hi, my name is Amanda. I do love audit. I teach audit to undergrads at a major Australian university. And I also have this YouTube channel here, which I'm so passionate about. And I'm really glad that I can help students understand audit better. Prior to this and doing my current academic job, I worked at Coopers & Lybrand, which is now PricewaterhouseCoopers. And I love to talk to all of my alumni who are currently working in the audit profession, and their insights and everything feed into what we're doing here. So today we're going to talk about internal controls. And there are 4 things we're going to talk about. How do I identify internal controls? I have to select the controls to test, doing the actual testing, analyzing the results, and then what does that impact have on audit strategy? So I can't do that from right here. I'm going to move over to my other set, which is really just me moving my desk and all my lights and my camera over to behind my green screen so that I can jump into my tablet and you can see what I'm talking about. So let's go. So let's see if we remember our audit risk model, okay? So remember that our detection risk will help drive our audit strategy. And if our detection risk is medium or our detection risk is high, then we're going to do some tests of controls. All right, and you may see tests of controls sometimes abbreviated to TOC or TOCs there. So to be able to do these tests of controls, as part of the detection risk evaluation process where you had to make inherent risk and control risk assessments, feeding into your control risk assessments, you would have had to identify control activities. All right, remember control activities are the policies and procedures and methods that we have in place to make sure everybody's following the right rules. So the first step in tests of internal controls is number 1, identifying those control activities. Now the second step is deciding which controls to test. Okay, and in deciding which of those controls to test, you need to take all of the controls, and there might be 20 or 30 controls in a process, and you need to identify the key controls. You don't have time to test them all, but you want to try and find the controls that do the most towards making sure that all transactions really happened, which is the occurrence assertion. All transactions are recorded at the correct amount, that we have all of the transactions, not just some of the transactions, recorded in the correct period using the correct journal entries. So we have to figure out which of those controls to test. Then after that comes the actual testing process, all right? And the testing process has sort of 2 phases. Phase 1 is about designing your tests of controls, all right? So you have to figure out, what procedure do I need to use? How big is my sample? Where do I get it from? What documents do I need? So I need to design my test of controls, and then I need to execute them. And executing them is really just the process you use of following the test of control to help you gather evidence. Now, the question here becomes, what do you gather? You find out for each test, test 1, test 2, is the control working or not? All right, and you might go ahead and you might collect 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you've got a little matrix here of all of your different procedures. And then you might say, okay, for test number 1, it worked for these transactions, didn't work over here. For test number 2, yep, these worked, it didn't work on that one, the control worked on that one. So what you end up having is that you find instances in which the control did not work. And we call those instances where the control didn't work a deviation. So a deviation is one instance in which the control doesn't work. So here we have 3 deviations. Now, I use this to determine whether the control is operating effectively or not. How do I make that judgment? To be able to make that judgment, what I need to do is I need to analyze the results. And I sort of make this sort of step 4 here, which is the analysis of results. And so I take that table that I have, I found out I've got 3 deviations, and what I need is something sort of like materiality. Materiality tells us anything above materiality is something I want to talk to management about, anything below is something we're not worried about. But I don't have materiality when it comes to procedures. What I have is something called tolerable deviations, and they are sort of expressed, I guess, potentially in one of 2 different ways. Option number 1 is that tolerable deviations, hang on, I'll make that more clear. Option 1 here for tolerable deviations is you'll get a number of deviations. Okay. Option number 2 is that you'll get a rate of deviation. Okay. So number of deviations, you could get 5, could be 10, it could be 14, all right? Or you could get the rate. The rate is probably more common. You might say 2%, 5%, 1%, whatever it might be. So this is where you need to calculate. So you've got your deviations. You're going to need to calculate your actual deviation rate. All right, so let's say here we tested, all of these different procedures. So we tested 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And so our deviation was 3 out of 10 different individual control activities that should have happened. So we have an actual deviation rate of 30%, which is pretty high, right? 3 out of 10. Now, let's say my tolerable rate is 2%. Like I have one of these options over here. Well, I've got more deviations than is tolerable. So what I have there is my actual of 30 is greater than my tolerable of 2. Tolerable of 2%. That means controls are not working correctly. So my control risk has to increase. And of course, if my control risk increases, that results in a decrease in detection risk, which results in an increase in substantive testing. And not just general substantive testing, but substantive testing specifically where you're finding more of these deviations. Because these deviations up here are like a little arrow that say, hey, find errors here, find misstatements here. So use that to your advantage. Now, what if it was the opposite? What if I found that my actual was 1% and my tolerable was 2%. Oh, I can't even spell tolerable. Tolerable was 2%. Well, then I've actually done better. The controls are working correctly. So control risk stays the same. All right, no need to change. You keep going with limited substantive testing because you've proven that the control activities that exist around the accounting data work correctly or operating effectively. Now, sometimes I get the question of, Amanda, are there any situations in which I would decide not to test internal controls? What situations would they be where I decide not to test them? And, the most common one is where we have low transaction volume. All right. So, there's 10 transactions. Rather than test the internal controls and then substantively test over 10 transactions, I might as well just look at 10 transactions. It's a lot faster if I've got low transaction volumes. The other option where I might throw out testing internal controls and just test substantively where there are highly material transactions. All right, so again, typically where there's low volume, but they're very big, again, you want to test just substantively. Now, one area that might be in the future where we decide not to test internal controls is that where we can use data analytics tools, and I can't even spell today, data analytics tools, to allow us to test 100% of the population substantively. All right, so AI might become so good that I can set it to work on the data set and it will test 100% of the population, no sampling. Well, if I move to that type of audit tool, and we have the technology to do that, then I do need to test internal controls. Remember, testing internal controls is about making sure that we can then do limited substantive testing. So there is this potential in the future that maybe we might throw out tests of internal controls altogether if data analytics tools allow us to test 100% of all transactions. Now that raises its own risks. In terms of its own risks, once I start testing 100% of the population, should I still be giving reasonable assurance, or will audit firms be asked to provide a guarantee? That is a really interesting question, one we don't have the answer to because it's not happened yet. But, if I'm an audit partner, I'm not sure I want to give guarantees, even if I am testing 100% of the population. So, there might be some risk associated with that there. So I hope that was helpful. I have had some questions recently about why are we testing internal controls? What does this all mean? So that gives you a big picture view. Why we test internal controls, what the findings mean for the rest of our audit. Now, of course, if you have any other questions about sort of the theory behind testing internal controls, pop them in the comments. I'd really appreciate a thumbs up if you haven't already. Consider subscribing, and you can always check out all of my free resources, my study videos, organized in a way that sort of matches a lot of university and college and professional qualification syllabuses, or syllabi, I think is the correct word, on my website, amandalovestoaudit.com, and then go to the learning resources and you're looking for the audit study guide. So I want to thank everyone from around the world. 2020 has been a really tough year. We've all been hanging in there, and hopefully things will get better in 2021, but I want everyone to stay safe, stay well, and I'll see you next time.